Okay, so if you're writing your resume, I mean your CV, okay, so usually it is longer than your resume, whereas resume is usually a one sheet of A4, okay, CV will have a little more information about you, okay, so it's customary that it is typically like a two sheets of A4, okay, 2 pages of A4, okay, so this will have a little more information about you. For example, your interest may be there, okay, and different like other types of skills may be there. Okay, besides we covered on soft skills, hard skills. Okay, so a CV will have extra information in there, and we'll look over the format of the CV in a while. Okay, so these, regardless of whether it's like a resume or CV, okay, if you stick with the standard format, then it will make your job easier, and also the person who would be reading your document, okay, the hiring manager or whoever's in charge in the human resource department, okay, when they are reading your that hiring document, CV or resume, okay, it will be easy for them to get to the particular section, okay, right away, rather than like looking for that information, turning pages over, okay. So again, when we look for, when we search at like a how to write CV or resume, you will come across many different ways, okay? But it's always better to make it simple and clear, okay? So because a CV is a type of technical writing, okay? So more importance is given to being concise, being precise, and clear and simplicity. All right, so make sure you stick with that. Don't make your document complicated. Okay, don't make your document too like a graphic in a sense. Don't include too many graphics in there, especially if you are applying for multinational companies. Okay, so what happens? I mentioned it yesterday as well. Okay, so big companies, when you apply for a job in those companies, it could be that your document may not be looked at by a live person. Okay, it would go through a system that would look for different keywords in your document. If the system finds those keywords right away, then your document will proceed, okay, to the hiring department. Otherwise, it could basically discard your application. Okay, so if you make your CV, let's say, very complicated, so you use a lot of symbols in there and formatting is there, okay, so maybe the system has a hard time understanding what's in your resume or CV. Okay, if it's a live person, then it won't be a problem. But for a system, depending on how it is configured, your document could end up not getting to the desired department. Okay, that's why we emphasize on simplicity. Okay, so for fonts, okay, stay away from serif fonts, okay? Choose sans serif because the endings would not be there in the font itself, okay? So it will be kind of easy for the system to basically interpret the message in your document. Okay, so in terms of the font types, the standard fonts like Arial, Calibri, these fonts should do just fine. Okay, so you can also look up online about what's the standard fonts for CV or resume. Okay, so these are some of the popular font size for your technical document or for your CV or resume. Okay, so in terms of size, don't make it too small or don't make it too big as well. Okay, so standard size would be around 10. Okay, 10 font size should be good for your CV. Okay, so if you're using headings, okay, so don't complicate like by, like using all different types of font sizes there. Okay, if you have to, okay, at most the font size in your document should be 2 font size only at most. If possible, just keep it just 1 font size. Okay, and if you're using headings, you don't have to make it like a large. All right, if you want to, you can just make it bold. Okay, so it appears different from the regular text in your CV. Okay, if not, then you can just make it regular, like a word, like without any formatting as well. Okay, just you can just indent the other. If let's say you are including different your skills, you have more than one skills that you want to include, and for the heading, you would do some like a skills, like a, you know, the key skills, let's say, okay? Then you would list your skills underneath that, okay? So when you're using bullets in your CV or resume, don't use those fancy bullet types, okay? So just make it simple, simple one, all right? So it is easy for system to understand what it is, okay? All right, so let's look at the format of a standard CV. Okay, so here we're talking about standard CV formats. So there may be other way CVs could be written, but we're not concerned about that at the moment. Okay, so let's just look at the standard CV format. So the first thing that you would include in your CV would be your name, your full name. Okay, so again, you don't have to make it bold, although it's up to you. Okay, so put it on in the middle. Okay, so that's the first thing that would go. So top middle part would be your name, your full name. All right. Then on the left would go your basically contact information, the address information on the left, and on the right you will have your the telephone, email. Okay. Although you don't need to say like telephone label, you don't need to do that. Everyone can understand the telephone numbers. If they only see the numbers, that's fine. Okay. Same thing with the email. You don't have to label it saying email address. Okay. Just put the information there. Without the label is fine. Okay. All right. So I have seen like CVs with like pictures, like extra information in there. You don't necessarily need to include them in your CV. Okay, so don't put like a, you don't need to unless you are asked to by your potential employer. Don't put your photographs, even like gender, especially in the West, where there are laws against discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, religion. Okay, they take it very seriously in the Western countries. Okay, here, you know, it's not so much. Okay, because the even though we may have like a labor laws, it's not strictly followed. Okay, so you don't need to include these things in your CV or resume. All right. Okay, so when I ask you to write a standard CV, you don't need to. It's better not to include these information in there. All right. Okay. Okay, so then comes the education field. Okay, so it's better just stick with the standard labels. Okay, either just say education. Okay, you don't even need to say and qualification. Education just should be fine. All right, then how to list your education. Okay, so do the reverse chronological order. All right, so if you so you guys are studying in Softwarica, so that's the first education qualification you would mention. Then you would include your high school or +2. Then you would include your let's say SEE level in there. So reverse chronological order. Okay, so the first thing, so for each section, for each of those qualification, how you would include them would be first mention the qualification, the degree qualification, or it could be, let's say, +2 or high school. Okay, first mention that. Okay, then mention your institution. All right, so Softwarica College. Okay, then include the date. Okay, so if you're still not graduated, then you can just say which year, let's say from 2018 till, so what's your expected graduation? All right, so when do you expect to graduate? So if your degree is a 3 years degree, then you can just put the either the year that you would you know, graduate, including if you have not graduated yet, then you can put like a month also. All right, so let's say you will be graduating in sometime in 2020. Okay, then you can put the month that you would graduate in there. All right, or you can just say from this year to present. Okay, that's also fine. So underneath your heading, underneath your label for your qualification, education qualification, okay, then put the relevant information. So you don't have to include everything that you have done or you're doing right now with regards to your education. Okay, so you are studying in Softwarica, so you don't have to include everything there. Otherwise, your CV will be way longer. Okay, so I would say for those still in college, or for those students who just graduated, so recent graduates, it's okay if your CV is just 1 page long. That's fine. Okay. So for you guys, at most like 2 pages, that should be fine, unless you have worked alongside your, like student life, and you have many things to include. I think for normal students, they will not have so many things to include in their CV or resume. All right. So what to include in each of those, for each of the qualification would be, what's the significant thing that what do you think are the important courses that you did, or any projects that you did? Okay. So maybe for each year you have like a year-end project that you need to do. Okay, so include them. So what would be, let's say you are interested to work in some field, let's say Android development field. Okay, so make sure you include those courses that would be relevant to the type of job that you're interested in. Okay, so anything significant that happened to you, or any significant achievement from the education qualification, so include them in there. Okay, so if your GPA is better, so for example, in terms of for GPA, average GPA, if your GPA is 3 or higher, then you can include them in your CV or resume. Okay. However, if your GPA is not that good, then you can omit it. Okay. You don't need to. You can explain it during the interview if it comes up. Okay. So you don't necessarily need to unless it's good. Okay. So for education qualification, just include what is significant achievement with regards to each qualification. That should be good. Okay, so when you would, let's say, start working and you have more qualification, you don't have to go back to, let's say, these secondary schooling year. Okay, it could be that you just include up to the high school. That should be fine. But for you guys, since you may not have sufficient qualifications, then you may go a little further. Okay, as you'll get more and more experience in your life, so you will kind of like do away with less significant qualifications. All right. Okay. If you have any question, you can ask me. Okay. All right. Then after education comes your work experience. Okay, so again, stick with the standard labels, for example, employment or work experience. That should be fine. Okay, don't try to be kind of smart in coming up with a new term, because those new terms may not be interpreted by the software in like big companies that would look for keywords, basically. Okay, and there will be a problem if that happens. Okay. So again, for the job as well, do the reverse chronological order. That means the most recent job should be mentioned first. Okay. So for the job as well, put the title first. Okay. So if you're working as Java developer, put Java developer. Okay. Then put your employer. Whoever is your employer, put there, and then the address. Okay. You don't need to put like a street address. You can just put the city. Okay, and the city name is fine. So if you are applying for job overseas, okay, then at that time make sure you mention country as well. All right, because city by itself may not be known to your potential employer then. Okay, so but if you have all your qualification from Nepal, and if you're applying to a Nepali company, then you can skip the country name there. All right, and after that, include the dates that you have joined or started working, and also if you are currently working, then put like a present, or put the date that you stopped working there. Okay, so if one thing about the employment, okay, if you're still working for that company, make sure you write the things that you did for that company in present tense. Okay, and for the employment that you no longer work for, okay, so you can write them in past tense. Okay, so for when I say present tense, make sure you use continuous tense for that. Okay, and the past tense should be just past tense is fine. Okay, so for example here, so developing a database to manage the personal information. So it's starting with ing, okay, kind of like present. What are you doing right now? Okay, and for other thing, if you have worked for this one before, then you would say developed. Okay, so we're using power words here. Developing, developed. Okay, so make sure you start your each kind of list that you have done with power word and put yourself in charge. Okay, that would look a lot better than if somebody reads your resume and sees kind of like passive style of writing in there. I was required to do something. Okay, that's not good. All right. So again, same thing as the education qualification. If you have too many qualifications, okay, so after let's say 10 years, you'll have many qualifications under your belt. Okay, at that time, you can skip some of the qualification that you feel may not be relevant to your job, right? Things like that. So basically, it depends on how long you have worked for and so on. So for now, don't worry about skipping anything. All right. Even if you have done internship, include it at this stage. All right. Okay. So one advice for you guys. Okay. So when you're reading for job description, so in your in the job description, so in the job advertisement, you'll find job description. So in there, you'll find many keywords there. So keywords are like important words that is kind of like integral or vital to the job position itself. So what you will potentially be doing in there if you get the job. Okay, so make sure you kind of note on those keywords. So when you're writing your CV or when you're writing your cover letter, make sure you try to include them in your document. Okay, so if a hiring manager is looking at it and they may not be so much a technologically savvy person. Okay, so if they may be just looking for those words in your document, or if it could be the system, the software system that is going through your document. So they may be looking at those keywords. All right. So if you include those keywords, then your chances of getting called for interview increases. All right. You may barely meet the qualification, but if they see the keywords in your document, then that could guarantee your interview. All right. That could make a difference in that. So do that. Okay, so next thing that you include after your work experience, your employment qualification would be your skills. Okay, so again, for this one, we have gone through different types of skills. Okay, so look at those types and try to group them under each type. All right. So this can actually make your CV longer. So especially if you have many different types of skills. Okay, so this can actually, increase the size of your document. All right. Okay, so one thing to be to take care of here. So if you've already mentioned about your qualification in, let's say, job in your employment section, work experience section, don't repeat the same thing elsewhere. Okay, so in other words, don't reuse, words or sentences in your CV. All right, so if you have mentioned the same thing somewhere, don't mention it again. Okay, so if one of your skills is very integral to the work that you did, then include them in your employment section. Okay, and leave out from your skills section. Don't have multiple things at same thing at multiple places. Okay, so mention your skills here. Okay. And also, same thing here. Look for the keywords in the job advertisement and try to include any relevant skills that they are looking for. And if you possess them, then mention it. All right? Okay. And think about if you have skills, but if they're not really applicable or not that good, it's okay if you omit them. All right? So make a better judgment about it. So it also depends on the type of job that you're looking for or applying. Okay, so the same skill set may be important for one type of job, but may not be that relevant for other type of job. Okay, so you can do that. Okay, so the next thing that you would include in your CV, okay, would be your interest and hobbies, okay, or interest and activities. Okay, so you may have interest in some sports. Okay, it could be, let's say, gardening, fish keeping. All right, so you can include them here after you have mentioned about your skill sets. Okay, all right, and also try to see what type of activity may be kind of relevant. Okay, if it doesn't add any value, it's okay if you don't include it. Okay, so for anything in your resume, ask, is it like adding some value to my resume or to my CV? Okay, if the answer is no, then you decide itself whether to include it or not. Okay, so if including one of these things in your resume paints a good picture about you, then include it. All right, otherwise, don't bother. Okay, then towards the end of your CV, you would include your references. Okay, so for references, it's usually customary to put 2 people or 2 references. Okay, and they have to be professional references. They cannot be your family members. All right, so for you guys, since you have not worked in many places, so so the potential employer would understand that you may not be able to furnish, let's say, professional references. Okay, so for you, it's okay if you include your, let's say, department heads, okay, in your references, as your references. Okay. However, if you are using somebody's name, make sure they know that you're using them as your reference. Don't, sometimes what happens is students or like job applicants, they include reference names, but those reference people would not know that they're being used as references. So when they get a call from the company with regards to a particular person, they may not know what to say. Okay, it could be that some months have passed since they met that person. Okay, and that person may not be on top of their head. All right, so make sure at least send like an email, short email saying, I have used you as my reference. Okay, if possible, ask for permission. Can I use you as my reference? All right, then use them. So that's a lot better than just unknowingly using somebody as your reference. Right, so just put yourself in their position as well. Okay, so for references, make sure you give the information, contact information. All right, so if they can be reached through telephone. Telephone is again I think the primary means. Okay, although these days emails also used. Okay, I think the means of communication they would use would be telephone. Okay, so again, email could also be used. They may just send an email saying, what's your take on this person? All right. Okay. All right. So those are the things that you would include in your CV. Okay, standard CV. All right. So there may be other ways that you could write your CV. All right. People would like include some like pictures and so on and so forth. You really don't need to do that. Okay. Simple is better for technical writing. So you'll see many of the things that we talked about is applicable for resume as well. Okay. So it will be kind of repetitive for you guys when we cover on the resume, right? So anybody has anything to add on that? Okay, so let's continue with resume writing. So I think Vishesh actually sent me a message with his resume. Okay, so if you are applying for, let's say, some graphic design position, okay, so if you want to impress that your potential employer with your graphical ability, designing ability, okay? So that could be an exception, okay? However, if you're applying for, let's say, a company, and your qualification and the type of job that you're applying for, you know, it's like, let's say you're applying for a Java developer, okay? At that time, it's, you don't need to make your resume very fancy, all right? So a simple document should do just fine, all right? And especially if your document would go through uh, some applicant tracking system, all right? At that time, it could be a problem for those systems to understand what is included in your resume, right? So for your assignment, just create a simple uh, standard CV or resume. That should be fine. Okay. So again, if you're applying for a job in Nepal, then at that time these may not apply for that. Okay. You may look at it and it would be okay if you include some extra information like your picture, like photo. These days, a resume, you'll find resume with many fancy settings there. Okay. If you know that a person will be reading your resume, at that time you have more freedom. Okay. However, if that's not the case, then stick with the standard resume or CV format. It will make your job, or it'll be a lot better. All right. Simple is better. Just keep this in mind. Okay, so unlike your CV, a resume will have a few information in there. Okay, there will be vital information like your education, your employment history, and your contact information. These things will be there, but there won't be few things in there, and we will discuss it in the coming slides. Okay, so in terms of size, it's okay if your job is, let's say you have like few years of experience, okay, after graduation, then it's okay if your resume is just 1 page long. Okay, so in case if your resume is longer, try to see what other things are you including in there that may not be necessary. Okay, and only put like those necessary information in your resume. That would make your resume shorter. Okay, usually a potential employer would not have a long time to go through each application. Okay, they may get like hundreds of application, and at that time, even though they may want to spend time reading each and every application, so in terms of time, that may not be possible. Okay, so if that's the case, then they'll just look for certain keywords, okay, certain sections in each resume, and depending on if they see it or not, they could actually validate or invalidate each application. Right, so make it simple. Okay, so in terms of the content in your resume, okay, your academic and your professional, your work employment would be the vital thing in there. Okay, the other things like your interest, your hobbies will not be that important. Okay, all right. So in terms of the font size to use, it's pretty much similar to what type of fonts you will use for your the Curriculum Vitae. Okay, the CV. All right, so 11 font size is good, and one of those sans serif, easy to understand fonts, they are good. Okay, the same thing about headings. If you want to make it bold, that's fine. If not, that's fine as well. All right, the way you would structure your resume, it would be clear that that's the heading. Okay, so let's look at the format of a typical or standard resume. All right. Okay, so same thing as your CV, your name would go in the middle, top middle, okay? Then your address, you don't need to label as address, okay? Without that label address, that's fine, just include the data. Now, with your contact information would go on your right, okay? All right, this is, I think you've already seen it, so make it simple. So if you're using word processor, so you can, include tabs in there to format your document. Okay. Then education qualification, same thing, reverse chronological order. Follow the standard format. Okay, don't include the date before. Okay, sometimes what we see is dates include to start each qualification. Don't do that. Start with your qualification first. Okay, then the institution where you received it. If possible, include address as well, especially if you're applying. Let's say out of if so, Nepal is not a big country. So imagine you if it were a big country, then it would be better to include address as well, at least city. Okay? So again, if you're applying overseas, include country name as well for each qualification. Okay? Otherwise, it'll be kind of confusing. Where is this institution? Where is this company? All right? Okay, follow the same thing, include only those important or relevant information under each qualification. Okay, especially look at the job description itself and see which courses would be directly relevant or important to that job application. Okay. Then the employment, again, follow the standard format with your position first, okay? Then the company with address and the date, okay? Include date at the end, that's fine. Then only mention those things that you did in that company that's like important. Don't include irrelevant or unimportant details for each work experience, okay? That will only fill the space and not add any value to your resume. Okay, so especially in resume, okay, you would want to tailor your resume according to the job you're applying for. So if you're applying for, let's say, multiple jobs, your resume that you will send for each of those jobs may be different. Okay, CV is not like that. Okay, CV has a lot more information. Okay, in there. But definitely, if you're sending a resume, then try to tailor it. Okay. All right, so do that. So include all of your qualification in reverse chronological order. Okay, so also make sure you note the keywords that your potential employer is looking for, and include those keywords in your resume. Okay, same thing. Start your resume list. If you have a list of things that you have done for a company, make sure you list them with power words. Start each list using power words, power word, and also write in active style. Okay, we went through yesterday about how to write in active style versus passive style. Active style kind of keeps you like what are you doing? Okay, versus like passive style, what were you required to do? Things like that. So put you in charge. Use power words. Okay, that would add more like a value or more force into your document in your resume. Okay, so this is optional again. So it also depends on the job that you're applying for. If it specifically asks for skills, then include it. Okay, if it is not really asking for it, then it becomes really optional. Okay, and especially if the skills that you possess, it's important, include it. If it's not so important, then you don't need to include it. All right, so basically look through the job description. It will be very clear what to include. Okay, the more thing that you have in your CV or resume, okay, from that is applicable to the job description itself, the better it will look. Okay. All right, so you're not including your your interest, anything like that. So if if the job description specifically says include references, then of course you would include your references. Okay. But otherwise, for resume references, you don't need to include that. You could actually include them in your cover letter as well. Okay, so only if they are asking it about it. So now comes the application tracking system. So I think I have alluded to it several times in this lecture series. Okay, so in terms of like a big companies, like big multinational companies, okay, they would have like a big hiring department there, human resource department. So they will have, so for each job application that would apply, so they may have like maybe hundreds of application job like positions that may be available. Okay, so they would advertise in one of those popular like job portals like monster.com, dice.com, or in, let's say, a newspaper somewhere. Okay, so for each of those job position, job, the vacancy, so they may get like hundreds of thousands of applications. So at that time, it would be kind of physically impossible in a sense to go through each and every cover letter and each and every resume. Okay, so they would have the system in there, basically this IT system, which kind of takes the people's resume and cover letter, and they would look for information, okay, that is relevant to the job positions. So basically, they would look for keywords. Okay, so the keywords that you will see for each job description. Okay, so that's the type of keywords that the system is looking for. Okay, so if you're applying for, let's say, Java developer, so there'll be a bunch of like keywords already defined there, and that the system will be looking for those keywords. If it finds many keywords matches, then the probability increases of you being called for job interview. If it cannot really find any keywords in there, okay, or very few keywords, then the priority decreases for your application, and consequently, you may not be called for job interview. Okay. All right. So in order for your resume or CV to pass through this applicant tracking system, okay, make sure you make your document as simple as possible. That means use standard sans serif fonts. Okay, for example, Arial, Georgia, Tahoma. These are the standard sans serif fonts. Okay, so don't use any special formatting in your resume. So I see many like a graphical thing in your resume. For the resumes that would be read by system, don't bother including those fancy formatting. Okay, it will only decrease the chance of your resume being selected uh, for the interview section. All right. So in terms of bullets, if you need to list your qualifications, then use the standard bullets. All right. You may have like a fancy bullets like tick marks or square brackets and so on. Don't bother with that. Okay. A simple like a hyphen would do just fine. Okay. Another thing would be include keywords, especially look for the job description, look at the job description and note the keywords being used in the job description. Okay, what type of skills the employer is looking for, and if you include the similar types of skills in your resume, that means your chances of getting hired will be greater. Okay, and also when you're starting your each list in qualifications, make sure you start with power words. Okay, and write in application, active style. Okay, so don't bother with including like a graphics, pictures, logos. You may have your personal logo or business logos. Don't do it. Tables. Some people, what they do is they put their information in table and they make the table borders invisible. Okay, so it may not be invisible for people, but it will be visible for computer systems. Okay, that would make it difficult for ATS to go through different sections. Okay, so don't bother with that. Don't bother with footers, anything like that. All right. So if you are including labeling, a heading labeling, let's say education. Okay, so stick with the simple and the common headings. Okay, so for example, work experience is common. Okay, so instead of let's say professional expertise. All right, so the ATS may be looking for common headings, and if instead of the common headings you include something that is rarely used, the system may get confused. What type of heading is this? What information do I look underneath this heading? Okay, so make it simple for the system. It will be good. Okay, so for qualifications or certifications, so make sure you include both the full form as well as the acronym. Okay, sometimes the system is looking for the acronym, for example, CCNP. Okay, and also what's the full form of that. Okay, especially in technical field, the abbreviation will be kind of like a very common. Okay, for example, CCNA. It's more common than, let's say, its full form, Cisco Certified Network Associate. So make sure you include acronym as well if it is popular. All right, that would also kind of like counts as including keywords in your resume. All right, so as mentioned before, for each qualification, don't start with date, okay? Because date may, for the standard convention, according to the standard convention, date, the system would look for date towards the end, not the beginning, okay? So if you put the date in the beginning, the system may get confused, all right? So you're trying to make easy for the system to interpret your document. So make it easy, and in turn, I think your score. So at the end of the processing, so when ATS is done processing your, let's say, resume, okay, it will score your resume from in a certain scale. So if your score cannot meet the threshold, like a certain level, okay, it will be termed as not like a good enough. Okay, so then your resume will go into some bin. All right, in a sense. All right, so they will set a minimum score. Okay, so the people who will be hiring will be putting those score. Okay, then if your resume would kind of like a score will be scored higher than that minimum score, then only they would call, or they will look at those application in more detail, or a live person will then go through those documents. Just imagine yourself, okay? So you get like a thousand application for a job interview. So after like 1,000, so when the ATS would go through each of those application, let's say it would kind of like discard about half of that, okay? So that means like 500 application would not reach to the hiring department. All right, that kind of makes the process easy for the people who actually would be working there. Okay, they don't have to bother going over those applications which may not meet the minimum requirements. All right, okay. So so normally, so in the job description itself, they may say send like your resume in certain format. Okay, so normally the Office text format, the Microsoft Office, like Word format is very popular. Okay, so if they accept PDF these days, I think PDF files are also accepted. All right, so you can also do that. So when you, especially for web submission, many companies actually accept application through their website. So a company will have their own job website. Okay, so applicant will kind of like create their account there. All right, using their email. Then after logging into the company job website, they will fill out the form, and towards the end, they can include those documents. Okay, so they can type the cover letter, and after cover letter or towards there, they will have an option to attach document. Okay, so at that time they would attach their resume. So the label will say there what type of documents you can send. So usually Microsoft Word is readily acceptable. Okay, I think like these days PDF is acceptable as well. So just look at it, and so you know, so doc file is fine. Okay, it's a word processing file. So if there's a system, ATS system, then I think it prefers doc file. Okay. Okay, so here are some final tips for you, whether you're like writing CV or resume. Okay, so try to make your, again, I'll repeat it again and again, try to make your resume or CV simple to understand. Okay, concise. Don't make your list like a, I wouldn't say like sentence, but think about like sentence. If you have a list of qualification that you're listing, okay, don't make it like a long sentence. Okay, if you can say the same thing in fewer words, stick with fewer words. Okay, so that will be preferable in your CV or resume writing. Okay, so anything that is not applicable to your resume or to that job qualification, it's okay to not include it. Okay, if it is not adding any value to it, don't bother including it. Okay, and especially stay away from, let's say, religious beliefs, like political affiliations, things like that. It's better not to include it in your resume. Okay, not even like gender. Okay, okay, because that could be subject to discrimination So normally we don't advise including them. All right. Okay. And also when it comes to resume writing, uh, you know, it's okay if your resume is just 1 page long, even if you have, let's say, 10 years of experience. All right. The way we do it is not include those irrelevant work experiences. Okay. So maybe you've done like an internship when you were like in college. Okay. So then like in 10 years, you'll have worked for like many companies. Okay. And there will be multiple things to show in your resume. At that time, it's okay to show like a less significant work experience or irrelevant work experience. So let's say you are working in your technical field, and for let's say a year or so you worked in non-technical fields. If that non-technical field is not adding any value to your resume, it's okay to skip those. Okay. Okay. Also, do not lie. Okay. Some people think I can lie. Even if you get the job, how would you work in that company? Okay. So again, it's best not to lie in your resume or CV because there will be time when you'll actually be doing the thing that's required for the job position. And if you can't do that, uh, then you could get fired, right? All right. And for your CV or resume, don't have like I in there. I don't want to see any I in your resume or CV. Okay, if I see that, then I'll deduct points. All right, so don't include I. Start your list with power word, that verb. All right, and put in like active style. That should be fine. But I don't want to see like any pronoun, any like a like especially I, we. Don't need that. And having said that, I see like 1 or 2 resumes with I in there. I was required to do or I did something. Okay, don't do that. That should be good for your assignment for points. All right, so a few more tips here. Okay, so if you have, like for CV or resume, you'll need to include your contact information. And if you have been using the same email for since you created when you were in, let's say, class 7, class 8, and if that email is not that professional looking, for professional, I mean, if the email has just your first name, last name, that should be fine. But if your email is very kind of like a non-professional looking, uh, don't bother including them. Okay, that will kind of like have like negative impression on you. All right. So create a new one if you need to for your professional career. Okay.
Rider Kituma 722, just like that, yes, sir?
Yeah. Don't include them. Right. So also, if you will, so since you guys will be graduating in in 1 year or in 2 years, if you will not have access to your college email, so when you graduate, if you will lose the access to your email, don't include those emails in your professional documents, okay? Because let's say 2 years from now, 3 years from now, the same email could be circulated. Okay, if they call that if they write some message to, let's say, the email that you included, but you don't have access to that email, that could be a problem. All right. So create a dedicated email that you want to that's just for your professional career. All right, and stick with it. Next thing is social media links and URLs. For print documents, don't bother with it. And also make sure you keep things neat and clean in your online presence. Okay, so these days companies can actually look or search for you online. Okay, let's say in Facebook, and if they see something that's not desirable there, then they may not hire you, especially in the United States. Okay, I was reading this article, and these days, even like let's say you get a visa you graduate uh, from your bachelor's degree, and you want to apply for your master's degree in the United States. So before you even enter the United States, at the border, the border the office, when you actually are getting a stamp in your passport, okay, so they will actually check your social media, and if they find something that is compromising, let's say your religious views or your views on certain gender, they can actually disqualify your visa. I think there has been news of students being rejected at that final point. All right. So same thing for your job application. Keep your social like presence, online presence, neat and clean. All right. And also avoid any like buzzwords. Okay. You may feel like you're impressing other like your potential employer, but they would have like heard this thing time and again. Okay. So when you hear the same thing from like too many applicants, it becomes too annoying. Okay. So you're not the only person they'll be reading application of. There will be like hundreds of others. And if they keep on seeing this, it makes it so cliche, right? So don't bother with that. Your grades, again, if your grade is good, your GPA is good, include it. Otherwise, don't bother it. Okay? So short-term employees, if your employment history is not that good, include them. If you have many years of work experience, a short-term employment could be avoided as well. All right? So, make a judgment about that. All right, so that's what I have for you guys, and it's already